There is a part of me that has always wanted a sequel, but honestly, the more I play this game and understand the message and themes they are getting across here, the more I am okay with not getting a sequel. Okay, so yeah, I was fucking wrong. We are so back, bitches! So, as a lot of you might know, an Okami sequel is currently in development! This was announced at the 2024 Game Awards just this last week, and I couldn't be more excited. Not only has it been nearly 20 years since the original game came out, but they also brought back Hideki Kamiya and revived Clover Studios. Now, Okami was the second last game Clover Studio worked on, with God Hand being their last one, which was also done in 2006, so it's fantastic news that they got revived and are going to be working on the Okami sequel. It's so amazing that we are getting the old gang back together to make another beautiful game. Now, while there isn't much information we have about this game and what it will entail, I've decided to create this video going over what we do know, what we can pretty much assume is going to happen in the sequel, what I really hope they change and don't change, and some loose predictions for what's in store. So sit back, relax, grab a glass of some Thunder Brew sake, and let's talk about the long-awaited sequel to Okami. Firstly, I wanted to go over some things that we know so far about the sequel. Most of this information is going to be coming from the official Okami Sequel webpage. I made sure to link it in the description if you wanted to check it out, but this is where we get most of the information about what is in store for the game so far. So far we know that the sequel is just in development. We don't really know any specifics about where they are yet in development, but we do know that they are bringing back multiple members of the original Okami team, including the already mentioned Hideki Kamiya and Clover Studio, as well as M-2 Inc. and Machine Head Works Inc. as well. M2 Inc. has worked on Resident Evil 3 and 4, as well as the Okami HD remaster. As for Machine Head Works Inc., I looked at their webpage and it has some photos of Resident Evil 4, I believe, on there, but it doesn't really show anything else that they've worked on, and also their webpage was created on December 11th of this year. So, yeah, that is a bit strange, but I'm hoping they end up being good. Outside of that, the webpage doesn't have much else. It links to the trailer, which also doesn't give us much to go off of, and then explains that it will be sometime before we see more news. Now, there is one thing that I wanted to point out here for something that I go into more detail within the next section in, which is that this page does specifically call out that we will be seeing Amaterasu and company in the game. So just keep that in mind for this next section. Since there isn't much to work off of on this webpage or with the trailer for concrete evidence of what's in store, let's go over some predictions that I'm sure we can say are pretty much assumptions and are 99% going to be the case when the game comes out. Firstly, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this game is not coming out next year. Since it seems development has just started and the webpage is saying that it's going to be some time before we have more info, I'm going to say we're getting this game in 2026 or even 2027. And while that is a long ways away, I do think that it will be worth every second of waiting. I don't want this game to be rushed out. I want it to marinate and be perfect. And I think everyone involved in its development will make sure that it is marinated so good. I also don't think that the art style of the game is going to change. I do think that it will be improved and new technology will be used to make it more crisp and clean, but I really don't think that we're going to lose this Japanese ink and watercolor style. When Okami was first developed, they actually took a very realistic approach to the environments and the character models. However, upon reviewing the footage, the development team decided to take it the brushwork stylized way. And while that was also because of the technology limits at the time, it ended up being such a defining factor of Okami, so I doubt that they'll change it in any drastic way. I also don't think that we're going to get voice acting. The original game has these sounds that are Animal Crossing-esque, and I think we will get that again, simply because this game takes place in fictional Japan, and these noises help convey emotion and tone without having to define the language the characters are speaking, and it helps with localization and time. And I honestly like this style of character voices for this game. I also don't think that we will see Amy being reincarnated. The reason I think this is because reincarnation and how it works has already been established in the Okami world, with Ami being a reincarnation of Shiranui. The reason I don't think this game is going to take the reincarnation angle with Ami is because if she were to be reincarnated, she would effectively be a different character. This is shown in the game when we have some time traveling shenanigans and can clearly see that Shiranui and Ami are different wolves with different looks, slight changes in their personality, and also different names. I just think it would be weird to have Okami Part 2 without Okami Amaterasu. Plus, going back to the official webpage for this game, it does mention that we're going to follow Ami and Ko in the sequel, and with the way reincarnation works in this game world, if Ami were to reincarnate, she would come back as a different wolf. Another thing that I am confident in saying that they likely won't do is make this a prequel. Not only in the trailer do they specify it will be a sequel to Okami, but the original Okami dwells a lot on the past within its story. Many times we are shown and reminded of events that happened hundreds of years in the past, like the original coming of Orochi and also our shenanigans in the Spirit Gate. So it wouldn't make sense for us to have a game set before the events of the first Okami, especially because of what we just discussed as well with reincarnation, as in the past, Ami was technically Shiranui, and I really don't think that we're going to change the main character of the game to anyone besides Ami, reincarnation or not. I also don't think that the game is going to change any of its major mechanics. I have seen many people discuss the original Okami in the sense of it being a Zelda copy or ripoff to some extent, with the mechanics and the dungeons, but I do think that these things work for Okami, and are honestly generic enough for Okami to draw inspiration from. And of course, they aren't going to get rid of the Celestial Brush, not only because it was in the teaser trailer, but also because it is what set them apart from other games in the past and will set them apart in the future as well. I also think that we are going to see the Celestial Plane in this game. I think because of how the first game left off, we will likely start within the Celestial Plane until whatever the plot driving force is calls us back down to Earth and Nippon. And once there, I can almost promise we will meet up with Isun again. Speaking of which, I do think that we'll see lots and lots of characters from the first game make an appearance here again too. Like Isun for sure, and Waka most definitely. I'm sure we would maybe even see Susanoo and Kushi, and maybe even a child that they might have depending on the time jump. I also think that we'll probably see characters like Oki, Otahime maybe, and I'm hoping and begging and praying to see Mr. Bamboo's epic return. However, I don't think that we'll see every single character from the first game be brought back in the second game, as the devs will for sure have to draw from different folklores and mythologies for this game, and in order to do that, we will have a lot of new characters based on those stories. Now, that's about all for my assumptions on the sequel, just based on the choices that make the most sense for the devs. Now, let's go into some more prediction territory with things that I think they will change and hope to see. The brush techniques are certainly something we will see a change in. I do think that we will still get a lot of returning brush techniques because there are some that were sort of a must-have, like the Power Slash, Bloom, Sunrise, etc. But I also think that we're going to get a handful of new ones. You have to remember too, the brush mechanics and shapes we use to pull them off in this game, even in all of its HD remasters and stuff, were all created on 2006 PS2 hardware. There has been a vast improvement in game design since then, and this will open the door for more complex options and abilities in this game, while still keeping it simple and quick to match the gameplay style. I also think that we're going to get a new, bigger, badder final boss. Japanese folklore has so many interesting concepts to pull ideas from, and here are just a few I'm throwing out there as some kind of extremely loose prediction or idea. First and foremost, Susanoo. You see, Susanoo in actual folklore of Amaterasu is her brother, and he basically got kicked out of the house for crying all the time. Amaterasu actually disguised herself and followed him, and they did some trial, and Susanoo claimed he won and was screaming and raging about it, and was destroying Amaterasu's rice fields in the process. Amaterasu was kind of indifferent to it, so she was just like, yeah, whatever, my brother is being insane, I guess, and then he blew a hole in her roof and threw a flayed horse in it, and also like crapped all over her palace. This is actually from the story of Amaterasu if you look it up. And one of her weaving maidens also got scared and she injured herself and died, so Amaterasu was obviously very upset by this and ended up sealing herself away in a cave. So clearly, they weren't friends, and Susanoo was banished to Earth because of all of this. In this original story too, when he went down to Earth in the folklore, he rescued a goddess named Kushinandahimi from Orochi, which sounds somewhat similar, I'm sure. Anyways, so it is possible if they're looking to go with some kind of new villain for this new game, they could bring Susano back, but make him maybe more grown into his ego and more irritating, and hopefully they won't keep the shitting on Ami's throne in this game though. If they want to go outside of Amaterasu's lore and maybe even play with the cat versus dog cliches, they could make the final boss a Nekomata. A Nekomata, for those who don't know, is a kind of cat yokai from Japanese folklore. There are two different types, those who are domesticated and then turn into yokai, and then mountain Nekomatas. I'll be speaking about the mountain type for this bit. Mountain Nekomata are cat creatures that are big like dogs and wolves and will devour humans. Some Nekomata have been described as being giant as well, which I think would be a really interesting angle for this game to take with a final boss. My last suggestion, or very loose prediction here, is that the final boss could be a reincarnation of Ami herself. In the original Okami, we already know reincarnation is a thing, and we also know time travel is an established thing as well. We have even seen Ami herself time travel and Shiranui time travel as well. Who's to say there isn't some reincarnation cycle out there in the past or future where Ami wasn't the good girl we know her to be? Heck, even the villagers thought Shiranui was Orochi's familiar at one point. What if Ami in a past or future life really was working for the bad guys, or even running the whole bad show? I think this kind of fight could be really awesome and be another one like the Ninetales fight where your opponent also has brush magic, because that's what made the Ninetales fight so memorable in the first place. Imagine this alternate timeline Ami, using your own moves against you in a final fight. It would be one hell of a piss fight for the generations to see. And now we're going to move into things I desperately do not want changed in a sequel and will be extremely perturbed if they end up making these changes. First and foremost, and I think I speak for quite a bit of people here, I don't want the game's rating to be changed or turned down at all. The game originally was rated T for teen, and I'm not sure if this got altered in the years when they started remastering it, but I desperately need Okami to stay the same vibe as it was originally when it comes to the humor and the characters and the violence even. Okami wasn't particularly a gore fest, but it had enough in there to make you go, wow, this game isn't messing around, and genuinely had some really high stakes and high creep situations. I need that to stay intact and really do not want this game watered down at all to make it kid-friendly. I don't think that the revived Clover Studio will do this, and I know they will put the same amount of hard work and dedication into this game as the first one for the fans, but I can't help but have a feeling this could happen due to them wanting to stay in the competitive modern market, and it worries me if that does happen. I also do not want a dip in quality for the story or the length of the game. The first Okami feels like an epic full adventure with 3 full arcs and an overarching story and plots. I desperately need this new Okami game to be the same. I want a vast, extensive, and full world to explore with rich stories and rich characters. I honestly don't think that this is going to change because the people working on it are passionate about this game. Hell, Kamiya went on Twitter recently and called someone an idiot and told them to go away because they asked him if AI was used in the trailer. So honestly, I think that we're gonna be so back. I also don't want the art style to change. I really doubt that this is going to change, like I said in the beginning, outside of a few quality of life and technical upgrades, but the brush style, models, and environments are something that makes Okami Okami. So I want it to be in the same style, especially because the style has also contributed to the themes presented in the original game. Lastly, to end off this video, I want to talk about some stuff I actually would like to see changed in this game, and honestly, there isn't too much because I think Okami is a perfect game to begin with, but I do have a few things that I could see being really beneficial in the sequel. Firstly, we have to talk about the boss rush at the end of the first game. It honestly wasn't stellar. I found it to be a bit anticlimactic in the grand scheme of things, and at the same time it was also just too easy. These bosses we fight in the arc of Yamato are not really increased in difficulty enough from when we first fought them, and at this point in the game we are much stronger too, so it's not that intimidating at all. Hell, the final Devil Gate trial located in Kamui was way harder than the boss rush and even the Yami fight combined. That was the only time that I felt I was being extremely challenged by this game near the end. I think when the sequel is being made, we shouldn't have a boss rush right at the end. Maybe we should have something like the Kamui Devilgate trial instead, if we must have something that warms us up for the final boss. Now, I do want to give a disclaimer. I know that the reason we have the boss rush here is because it's the arc of Yamoto, and it's a part of the story and lore and plot, but it was just kind of a meh thing because of how repetitive and easy it was in the grand scheme of things. The next thing I would like to see changed a bit is the fetch quests. There isn't too many fetch quests in this game that are a part of the main story, but I think gaming as a whole should retire from them, honestly. And yes, I'm saying this knowing that Amy is a dog and dogs play fetch, but that's not the joke here. I literally just don't want fetch quests in this game. It's much better to have quests where we play the game and go through the story as normal, following other story beats and come across some items that we remember past characters referencing. A good example of this being well done in the original Okami is with Rao and the fox rods. We go onto the sunken ship looking for them, find the lucky mallet instead, which is a callback to something Waka explained to us, and this helps us progress in the story. Then later on, as we naturally uncover more of what's happening with the water dragon, we uncover the fox rods. This is a much better structure than just character A wants you to go get something from character B, but character B needs something from character C first. This is something that I want changed in lots of games and not just the Okami sequel, but I think it would be really nice to see it implemented here. Now this third point is maybe a nitpick, but I don't know. I really need Isun to not be super repetitive in this second game. Isun, by design, is there to be the character's navigator and guide. He is here to explain things and help us go through the plot points because Amy doesn't speak, so Isun essentially speaks for her. But this type of character can be done one of two ways. One where they just communicate with Amy and the player to give them very basic hints on what to do next, or it can be done how Isun was, where every character interaction, object interaction, and reaction to anything is explained multiple times to the player. Isun often tells us our exact objective 2 or 3 times in a string of dialogue with a character, and I really think that the game could cut the player some slack and trust that they are retaining some of the information. One of the most prevalent examples of this in the original game is whenever you get a new brush technique. The brush god will come to you, introduce themselves, and introduce their brush techniques. After they give you the power, Isun then for a second time tells you the god's name and the brush technique you just got. The only useful thing he has to say in these moments is he gives you a brief tutorial on how to use it, but then after you learn it, he stops again and explains for the 3rd time what the technique is. It's just very unnecessary, and I don't think it provides enough importance to the game or the backstory or personality of Isun to justify him doing it again in the sequel. And I think that's it for my list of demands. And listen, I'm a very simple person. I wish for an Okami sequel with a good story, good art direction, and good new bosses. And I don't want any zombie Amaterasu. I don't want to turn into Amaterasu myself. And I don't want any more weird surprises. You got it? All in all, I think Okami 2 is in really good hands so far, and I'm excited to see what they end up doing with it as development continues. It's such a blessing that we are even getting a part 2 to begin with, so I'm just super excited, and I have my hopes high that the development team will make this game just as special and memorable and cared for as the first one. That's gonna be all from me today. If you like this video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe, hit that bell, do all those silly little things to help support my channel as I try to post videos at least once a month at this point, but I also stream 2 to 3 times a week as well. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, take care, and may the sun rise again. Bye!